Hi boys and girls, this is Mrs. Gabriel, and I'm going to be lecturing as quickly as possible over Chapter 13, which is about achieving energy sustainability. Sustainability, remember, is when we live in a way that we don't leave any trace of ourselves behind for future generations. This specific chapter is going to be about renewable energy. I would highly recommend that you watch this a couple times through and you pause regularly, because I will not be reading all the slides to you. The information will just be there for you to read in a more visual format than in paragraphs. Now, the opening picture that we're looking at right here is about moon power, and that is using energy from the moon in order to produce electricity. Obviously, the moon light is not light produced by the moon, it's just reflecting off the sun, so we get nothing from that light energy. So what else could be producing energy from the moon? You got it, tides. So somewhere in New York, they're actually playing with a facility where they're using tidal energy in order to turn turbines, and you turn the turbines to generate electrical power. So this is an opener to just one example of something that could be renewable energy. And as always, it has some advantages and some disadvantages. But one of the biggest benefits is that we're not using up other fuels, we're not harming the ecosystem, we're being very cautious. And if you look at this slide right here, these are some things that you definitely need to know going into this chapter. You need to know the difference between renewable and non-renewable energy, and then just to tie connections to what we've been doing in class, remember that uranium, which we use for nuclear power, is a non-renewable energy. It's finite, it runs out, and it can be depleted. I'm going to move on to the next slide. I won't always give you a heads up about that, but feel free to pause on these word slides, read them to yourselves, cover the slide, and test yourself before you move on to the next one. Get into the habit of doing that, okay? Now, as I told you before, I really want you to start paying attention to pictures, charts, tables, anything visual. Cover things, test yourself on things, go over it and over it again and again. So this is an example of different types of renewable and non-renewable energy resources. Fossil fuels and nuclear fuels are non-renewable energy resources. And renewable energy resources include potentially renewable energy sources like biomass, which is renewable as long as humans do not use it faster than it can be replenished. And although renewable energy is a more sustainable energy choice than non-renewable energy, using any form of energy has an impact on the environment. For example, if we think about biomass, biofuels, it's a renewable resource only if you use it in a sustainable way. If you over-harvest whatever you're using for your biofuels, your biomass, then you're going to lead to deforestation, degradation of the land, and possibly a lot of ecosystem disasters. So we all want to say hip hip hooray to renewable energy resources, but we have to be careful because we have not come up with the most efficient way that is also not damaging to the environment. Another example is if you think about wind power. Wind turbines can unintentionally kill the birds and bats that run into them. Hydroelectric turbines, which is with a dam, can kill millions of fish. Fish can't swim upstream for their spawning, or they can't get by. And photovoltaic solar panels, which are also PV solar panels, require very heavy metals and a great deal of water. And these heavy metals are things that are significant waste products in our environment. So they're cleaner energies because we're not putting pollutants into the environment. They're cleaner on that end as far as their emissions go. But please pay attention to the benefits and the costs, or the advantages and the disadvantages. You need to know both, and you need to be able to speak about both. So a word you should get used to using is conservation, which is right here in the bold print. And conserving means to use less. So they probably will ask you questions on how can you use less energy, like lowering your thermostat, turning off your lights when you leave a room, driving fewer miles in your car, carpooling. And energy efficiency is what we get from being more conservative in our energy uses. And why do we care about using less energy now? Read this, pay attention to the pictures, and test yourself on it. Again, you're going to read all this to yourself, but these are just more examples on how we reduce energy use inside and outside of our home. I know you know all of these, but it's a matter of, can you list them when you're asked them in an essay form? Can you come up with all of these? Test yourself. Don't worry about my really big font. It doesn't mean that you need to pay more attention to it. It just means I'm still getting used to doing this kind of stuff. This is really important when we talk about industry. So industry, commercial, factories, it's different than residential. So you live in a home, your home is residential, industry is factories, commercial is like Walmart's and Target. But industry accounts for 42% of the United States energy consumption. So they need to improve their efficiency as well if they're going to make a difference in our environment. So cars, trucks, vans, pickups have all increased their fuel economy since, the 1970s, and we've discussed in class why that's happened, and that's a good thing, but not so much in industries. And the government, pay attention to this, CAFE, corporate average fuel economy, has not increased after 1985. So there's a big movement in sustainable design in buildings and architecture and engineering. So sustainable design in communities, sustainable design for a brand new home that's being built, and sustainable design is about being more efficient in what we live in and what we work in. And we can do things really simply, just like building our homes so that the windows are facing certain directions in the summer and the winter and the spring and the fall. Just turning your house a certain way. So it really can't just, when you're designing your house, it really just can't be about where would you like to look at, what's the nicest view. You really should be thinking about what is going to be the most energy efficient way and sustainable way of placing your house on the lot. In addition to where you're going to place it on the lot, you really should think about, are there passive and active ways that you can collect free and renewable energy and use it and convert it into electricity or heat. So take a look at the diagrams here, and I'm going to go through a couple of slides that are showing this in different ways. Know the difference between passive and active. Just pay attention to that. I think you'll start getting it once you pay attention to the pictures. And notice the steps of what's happening here. So the summer sun, all this sunlight is being blocked in this passive house because of the roof, but the winter sun, because the winter sun never goes as high in the sky, all that sun is going to come into the home, which is going to help heat it more. So when the sun's higher in the sky and it's blocked on the roof because not as much of it can get into the house, it won't heat it as much. That's a nice passive design that helps save energy or give us more heat energy when we need it. This is one that I am going to read to you. Why are we still wasting so much energy? Because fossil fuels don't cost much, and because the government tax breaks and other financial incentives for saving energy really don't wow us enough, and they more so provide and promote energy waste. There's lots of new ideas that are coming into play that people are using in sustainable design and more energy efficient home building. And one example that's not in your textbook, but I think it's interesting, and it always makes me think about the Three Little Pigs, is straw bale housing. So they're actually using straw. Yes, straw just like you would find on a farm, and they use it as a super insulator. More so in other countries than our own, you'll also see living roofs. And we're really, if you go to Hartford Community College, you can actually see they have a huge green roof on one of their buildings, and they're trying to become a more sustainable and green campus. But green roofs are used a lot in Europe and in Iceland, and they're usually used with compost, mulch, any kind of spongy material. There's a lot going on with green roofs and research. It would be great as a senior capstone project to do something with green roofs, because it's not as easy as you think to make a successful green roof. But it's not going to absorb as much energy. It's also going to add more oxygen to the environment. It's also going to insulate. So I can go on and on about the benefits of living roofs. Just another picture of another example of sustainable thinking and design with energy efficiency when you build your home and how you place your home on your lot. Inside our home, we can also buy Energy Star ratings. We can buy for our appliances anything that has the more stars or Energy Star ratings, the more efficient the appliance is. And now that you understand what that kWh is per kilowatt hours, you start comparing your refrigerators when you buy them, and you'll really see why there's a difference in the number of stars that we get in Energy Star ratings. There used to be big tax breaks for this, and there are some government politicians that are trying to give you more tax breaks for buying more things with higher Energy Star ratings. This is an example of a previous picture that I've shown you that's from your textbook, just so that you understand, once again, passive solar energy. We're not using pumps for passive solar energy, and we're not using mechanical devices, but we are utilizing the sun in a way that we get heat energy from it when we need it, and we don't get the heat energy from it when we don't want it. And this is just from another resource I had so that you can read all these details if it's too much, if I'm talking too fast. So I'll just be clicking through some pictures and slides now, and I'll be clicking through some tables. I'm not going to read the tables to you. I really want you to just pause and read things to yourselves. This is an example of active solar energy. So now we are using something mechanical. And these are the types of tables with passive or active solar heating that you should get to know, study, pause, test yourself. See how many of these you can come up with on your own. You know them all, but can you come up with it on your own? This one's about using solar cells, photovoltaic cells, and the advantages and disadvantages of each. And this is just an example of using some of those solar collectors in a larger facility for electricity generation. More about how the photovoltaic solar cells work. Just an idea of how simple it is to put a photovoltaic solar cell on your home. And we can also put it within our window glass now and in our tiles. And this is an example of one on roof shingles. I really like this table because this shows you why, even though we might like solar energy, this is the generating costs of it per kilowatt hour. So a lot of us around here are using mostly coal, and it's only costing us 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour, okay, on average. And then you look at hydropower, hydroelectric power, think of Conowingo Dam, and that's 4 up to 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Some people, every little penny means every little thing to them. That's a good math problem. Nice conversion practice we could do there. Pay attention to this down here. I just really like this picture. This is the California Academy of Sciences, the sustainable design of their San Francisco Research Institute. And they're using natural light and ventilation, and they're generating most of their own electricity with solar panels on its roof, and they're capturing water for their rooftop garden. Just start reading to yourselves. Read to yourselves. This is all about the sun. The sun's the ultimate source of almost every type of energy. Remember that. That's why you have a big picture of the sun in the upper right-hand corner. Or I'm sorry, left-hand corner. Most energy, the ultimate source is the sun. Remember, remember. Okay. Read to yourselves about carbon, biomass, and biomass can be wood, charcoal, and manure. It can also be ethanol and biodiesels and biofuels, which are going to come up in other slides where I just have pictures for you to wrap your head around this a little more. Hydroelectricity is like a dam, like the Conowingo Dam, the Hoover Dam, please read about the advantages and disadvantages of dams and the environmental problems that we've had with building dams and using hydroelectric power. But they've certainly made difference. Besides just power, we've also used dams to our advantage to hold back from major floods. So this is an example of a dam. This is really what's going on when you drive over that Conowingo. You don't see all this stuff. You see the workmen on there. You're driving your car right over here. And this is all the stuff that's happening underneath. This is why they put up big things and big signs where you shouldn't be swimming under here because, God forbid, you get sucked into that intake valve and go through the turbine. I don't think you'll make it out in one piece. And then you've seen the outflow, and usually not all of the gates are open, and you'll see the water just coming out on one side over there. So these are all the different types of systems we can get from hydroelectric power. These are in your book. You know what this is. And notice how they're directed towards the sun, where it would hit the most directly at different times of the day. And that's important to note. That's why they're all set up like this, and they're all angled in a slightly different direction. It's about capturing as much of the sun's rays as concentrated as possible to get the most energy. Earth's internal heat, remember, we get a lot of heat geothermally from the Earth's core, and that's because it's radioactive and it's decaying isotopes. This is an example of what a geothermal system looks like in a home. Lots of people around here that are building new homes are getting this installed. It doesn't pay off the first day or first year. It's going to take a couple years for most of these systems to pay off. But they pick up the heat because a lot of people think it gets colder when you go underground, and it actually doesn't. It gets warmer, you know, if you think about average temperatures. Read this to yourselves. And this is an example of a geothermal heat pump. Sorry about that. I can't even rewind on whatever the software is. Okay, and then read to yourselves about the different types of geothermal energy systems that we use. More about hydropower. Again, advantages and disadvantages of large-scale hydropower. This is important that you understand this because a lot of this is happening at the Conowingo, which is local. But it happens everywhere with dams. You've already learned a lot about wind energy from the labs that we've done. Just remember also the difference between kinetic and potential energy, and wind energy is using kinetic. Wind energy is converting kinetic energy. That's moving energy. It's not stored. And this is an example of a wind turbine. Know that this is the part that we call the generator. Know your advantages and disadvantages of wind power. And hydrogen fuel cells, which are like a battery. Pay attention to the pictures here so you understand a little more about how they work. Really, this is easy to read, but cover things and test yourself. Pause, cover, test yourself. Pause, cover, test yourself. See if you remember the big picture. Can you give me steps on how this works? You see a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. Can you repeat those steps, and can you think of a way to memorize the basics of it in your head? Okay, this is also in your book, but this is comparing the different energy types by their advantages and disadvantages, by the pollution, the greenhouse gas emissions that they give out, and by their energy, okay? So please study that and get to know that. This is just an example of, no kidding, cow dung, which is cow poop in India, and they're actually making fuel from the cow dung. Yes, it's a real picture of real people working with real cow dung. So these are some advantages and disadvantages of that, or that's just one example of a type of biomass. So we do convert plants and plant waste to liquid biofuels, and one of the most common ones you'll hear about is ethanol and biodiesel. If you just pull up at the gas station, you'll see signs right around the gas pump about the ethanol that's in there. And biodiesel, there's even people that try to make their own biodiesel around this county and drive around in their cars running entirely on biodiesel fuel, which I think is kind of interesting. This is an example, this is a picture of switchgrass. It can remove CO2 from the troposphere and it stores it in the soil. And we can convert switchgrass into ethanol. And it's pretty sustainable because it grows very, very quickly. There's a lot of research out there right now where people are disagreeing on the calculations for really how many kilowatt hours we're getting from, an acre of switchgrass. So just get to know the difference, the advantages and disadvantages of ethanol. And of biodiesels. And their contributions to global warming and to emissions in the atmosphere. So I'm going to stop this presentation. I went at about 21 minutes. I hope that you were able to run this. But the last slide here is what can you do? Energy use and waste. So please read some of these, and if there's anything that you're not doing now that you think you could try to implement a little more in your lifestyle so that we can help with the reduction of emissions of any kind of fuels, and if we can help with living more sustainably. One little thing, if we all do one little thing, it's going to start making a big difference. All right, good luck on the test.